Hi, everybody. Get my little frame. How are we doing today, guys? We're telling your followers that you've started a live video. It's fact. It's true. And prize today goes to Diane Phillips. Hello, you are my first viewer. More Than a Murmur's back. Hi, how are you? Sarah. Guys, today's a very special day. You know why? Today is May 1st. Happy May. Today is also Ana Gomez's birthday. So I'm going to ask all of you to sing Ana Gomez a song, a birthday song with me right now. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Ana. Happy birthday to you. And many more. She's an amazing friend. She's not only my writing partner, she's just become somebody that I just really, really dig, and we enjoy friendship and conversation and this whole wild scope of creating this 5-book series. Number 2 is on its way, October 11th. Get ready, where the sun rises. We've got book 3 that we're already like writing and cooking and stewing on. We're talking about book 4. We got book 5. So excited. So Ana, happy birthday. I love having you in my life. I hope that your day has been awesome and blessed and that your year is going to be the best year yet. If you don't know her, follow her. Ana Gomez Books. Go now and give her a follow, or after this show. Guys, how are we doing, everybody? How are we doing? This is the 4th and final, or the 3rd and final show of last month, which now we're in May, but Sexual Abuse Awareness Month. The past 2 shows have been heartbreaking and amazing, and women have come on boldly and bravely to tell their stories, women who've reclaimed their narrative, women who are victims of abuse or rape or molestation or any, and who have dealt with this, the stain of that, the anger of that, the shame of that, feeling like it's their fault, and they have, in the course of their life, readjusted, reimagined, refocused that narrative, retrained that narrative, and reshaped that narrative, and are now using it in their favor to tell stories, to shine a light into dark places, and to say, you know what, you're not alone, it's not your fault, and let's talk about this. And so today, what I wanted to do was I wanted to bring on some guests who are advocates and who are allies and who are really revolutionary in what they're doing to combat sexual exploitation, sexual abuse, to talk about the conversation, to blow open the door, and to flood light into this very, very dark subject. So if you watched the first 2 shows and you felt a little, dumbstruck by them, and you were like, wait a minute, and I'm amazed, the outpouring, how many people have been touched by this, and no pun intended, but how many people have been affected by this, by sexual exploitation or sexual abuse or some kind of form of abuse. It's overwhelming. And the consequences of that from just a sin level, where it affects the mind, it affects the body, it affects the health, it affects your perception, your relationships, to know that you're not alone, to know that you are okay, to know that there is a hope, and to know that there's a chance for healing and a chance for restoration and a chance for revival, and to move on from the anguish into something else more promising, and to speak life into that, that's amazing. And so I'm going to cut to the chase, and I'm going to bring my first guest on. I am on her board. It's called the Jensen Project. You've seen me post 2 things about it so far. She's been in my life, and I've been in Janet's life for about a year now, since last summer, so a little less than a year. Ana Gomez is also somebody who's on the board. Javier, who introduced Ana and I, is the bridge and the matchmaker, the Yenta of all great things, and he brought me into Janet's life and she into mine. And we had our first board meeting recently. Everything is about to get underway. So you're going to start seeing the Jensen Project come through my feed a lot more, and I want you guys to know what that is, to know what we're involved with. So with no further ado, I'm going to bring on Janet. Let me see. We worked it out earlier. Um, we worked it out early on. So let's do this now. I just invited her. Hang on one sec. All right. Janet, are you there? Janet, can you hear me? I feel like you're there. Okay, Janet, I'm inviting you again. Let's see. Look at all this birthday love Anna's getting. Happy birthday, Anna. Okay, it says that Janet was unable to join. We had this issue a little earlier. And let's do it again. Let me see if she's in the list of, man, there's so many people who want to talk today. Wow. Hold on. Okay. Janet, I'm coming to you again, girl. Perfect. There it is. There it is. Well, hi, Janet. Welcome to the Polaha Chautauqua.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you. It's nice to see you. We saw each other on the Zoom, and then a summer ago we saw each other on the Zoom, but we haven't met yet in person because of this weird COVID thing. But I think there's a plan to make that happen in September.
All right. Ask away. I know you're going to ask.
Okay. You got it. You ready to rock and roll?
Absolutely.
So my question for you, Janet, is what inspired you to get involved in advocacy for sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, and why did you start the Jensen Project? And then we'll get to talk about what the Jensen Project is a little later down the road, but why get involved in the first place?
Well, it's because of, I'm sorry, I'm going to get one more thing, Chris. I think we can talk about my start. It's another pillow, so I don't have to lean back. Not what I expected.
Okay.
All right, so I, at a very young age, went to France there was 8 American kids and 80 French kids, and we had to speak French to get anything we want. And quite frankly, the only thing I remember is Passe-moi la selle, which is pass the salt. But we were playing capture the flag over in France, and I hurt my back, so they sent me home. I had a mom that took care of my brother that was always having an asthma attack. And so the day that I was supposed to go to the doctor's, she dropped me off and took my brother. And I went into the doctor's office, signed in, do the whole thing. And I'm 12 years old, sorry. I want to make myself older because I think I would have done better with it. I got into the room with the doctor. It was just him and I thought he was going to go around to my back. You know, you had those paper little things that they call it coverage. I don't know what it is, but it's like a tent over you. And instead, he grabbed my chest. I told my mom, and I'm sure she told my dad, because she came back and she said, Janet, you know, it's your word against his. And I lived in a small city. Unbeknownst to me, my dad was probably one of the bigger players in the city, but I didn't know that. And it kind of got shoved underneath. I think my mom, before she passed, we talked and she was unhappy with herself for that. And I said, come on, there's so many things, don't worry about it. But I didn't get to speak. And then at 25 years old, I went running at 4:30 in the afternoon. Outside of my apartment, I lived around a defunct golf course, which it wasn't very big. It would probably have been about the size of a regular golf course, 4 holes. Mm-hmm. And I was jogging and I ran past a very nice looking blonde guy and I said hello. He just grunted and then behind me, I heard he came up behind, picked me up from my head, threw me to the ground, and beat me to the point when he said, "I'll kill you if you don't shut up." You can see your face out to here. It's not like the movies. And I decided right then and there I'd be quiet. It was, I don't really know how long the incident was. He was into every type that you can think of. Unfortunately, nobody saw anything, even though it was in the middle of the day. There was lots of old trees. And the whole thing got a little crazy because I went home. Well, first I went to a gentleman's house, and I didn't know, I say a gentleman, but it wasn't a gentleman. Because I knocked on the door, he opened it, and he took one look at me and slammed the door in my face. And I was like, okay, I got to jog home because I'm not going to get help. And when I called the police, the gentleman came out, looked out at this little bay window, and he said, "Where did it happen?" And of course I pointed, and he said, "I'm sorry, that's in the Hearst city, and it's not here." And he leaves, and he tells me to call the Hearst police department, but didn't do anything else. So I called, fortunately got a really, really good detective, and I remained friends with him until he dropped dead at his desk at 52. We went down, and there was a individual in the psychological ward holding hostages. And so when you got to the hospital, it was an indigent hospital. At that time, that's the only place you could go for a rape exam. And the cop cars were all around, and we slid in because of the detective, and I went in. And mind you, this started at 4:30, and even if it was by then 6:30 or 7, I did not get a rape exam till midnight. And I kept hollering about my face because, I was pretty beat up. I needed to be stitched up. And the head of the emergency room, and he was a doctor, came up and told me, excuse my words, but I'm going to repeat his. He said, "You're being a narcissistic bitch because you aren't a gunshot wound, nor are you a stabbing." And thank goodness the detective came in and just cut it off. And I got my face stitched up. I had left my brother at that point in time. This tells my age. There was a answering machine. And he was outside during this whole time, but because of the police and what was going on, they wouldn't let him in. And he decided at about 4:30 that he was going in no matter what the police said, and that's what he told him. And that is about the time I was checking out. So we were like two ships in the night. And I went home, and the detective said, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Oh, hold on. No, I'm not okay, but I really didn't want to." It's weird what you do. You start thinking you're wasting people's time and that you're not worth it. So I told him to go ahead and leave, that I'm sure that my brother would be here soon. And he did show up. But when he knocked on the door, I said, "Who is it?" He gave me his name. And I said, "Well, you need to give me the Jensen knock before I open the door." Because I mean, you get very, very paranoid. I got the Jensen knock, and my brother came in. We decided we better call my parents. My dad and I are both September birthdays. And so we had just got done celebrating the birthdays, and they just went back to Iowa. They actually had an apartment, a small apartment for them when they came down to the Hearst, Euless, Bedford area in Texas. Mm-hmm. And, those two things were really primary in getting me totally, I had to do something. I became aware. I finally began to accept what happened to me. I went and went a little crazy. I got the first ever private hospital to take victims in. Unfortunately, it went defunct after a while, but it did take victims in. And I was on a documentary, which I wish I could find it. I was either on ABC, NBC, or CBS, because that's all there was at that point in time. I think there was public television too.
Yeah.
And the producer, or the producer's name was Salinger, and he had a deal where he asked a bunch of victims and survivors. I hate to call them victims because it takes a while before you become a survivor in your head. But he had grabbed about 11 of us and asked us if we wanted to do a documentary where we went into a penitentiary and talked to some of the individuals that actually had performed these acts. And about 7 or 8 of us went in the end. And that was very, very prolific for me because I got to sit across and ask questions and listen to what they had to say. And what they said, one of the gentlemen said, well, you know, he'd go home and tell his mom that he had a bad day and she would give him one of his Valium. The other one, I don't know if folks know of it now, it's called Noxzema, but it basically eats, I mean, it'd be like you putting cut on your sore and then putting menthol and peppers and all that kind of burns and eats you out. He actually used that inside the woman. And then another one took a hot curling iron and used it on her. So, I mean, you look at your story and you think, well, maybe I was lucky in some ways.
Right.
So that was another piece of where I had to accept what was happening. I will say this, there is a part of the documentary that didn't get in, but once again, it made a big deal for me. I told them that I wanted to take them by their private parts and hang them up in the door. Now, you know, that would never happen. It wouldn't, even if I could do it, it wouldn't work. So, but by saying
the body would rip right off. You just lose the member.
Yes. So that was probably why I said it. I knew it wouldn't get on, but it did help me. And going to the penitentiary and seeing and talking to individuals that had actually done these horrific things to people helped me and inspired me.
Yeah.
To the point I started going out and public speaking, and that was almost 40 years ago, September. So at that time, you know, to get a gig to go speak was pretty hard because you just didn't speak of this. But the thing that actually energized me was when I would go, if there were women in the crowd, and I did have one male come in and talk to me, but the women would come up in a lot more than I wanted to even imagine, and come up and say that it had happened to them and they had not said anything.
Yeah. I wanted to say there's a theme that's starting early on when you were a little girl in that doctor's office, and then again what your attacker said to you, which was be quiet, silence, silence, silence. And I think that theme of being abused and being a victim of sexual aggression, and then not having the agency to talk about it and to be heard and not called crazy, or what your mom was saying, and God, you know, I understand that, I'm sure she'd read that, but to be worried about like his word versus her word, you have turned that silence into you've weaponized your silence into this amazing, you now have an incredible voice for advocacy. And I know there's more to your story, but I do want to jump to, at what point did you say, because you were somebody who, so just to clarify, and I should have started by saying this show is a warning, trigger warning on the show. I forgot to mention this, and it's an adult conversation happening among adults. And so if you have kids in the room, obviously they're probably already gone by now, but you know, I should have said that at the top of the show. You're somebody who's in a unique position. You have authority financially, you've got experience, you're extremely intelligent. So you've got all these tools that you're able now to use to give a voice to people who have been abused. Can you talk about what was that? So the Jensen Project does what exactly? When did you start it? And what's the point? Why do you do it?
I do it because I can't do anything else. I mean, that's, if I had to be very, very honest, that is really the truth. What we do is fuel partnerships, and we do that through Grant Tank and other, you can be invited to apply on a separate note, but we are looking to help nonprofits that are in the field that are working with mainly women that need a place to stay, housing, or economic empowerment, or both. When we do that, we just don't give money. We actually give them the opportunity through a program called Lift, where they get strategy folks that will come in and help them run through what they're doing. We have a group that works with them to figure out how you actually raise money, and do you have your folks, they might be all the folks are there, but are they in the right seat? And where we sit, it's very interesting. This year we gave to 11 individual unique partners. And when we go through this year, they'll have an opportunity to apply for all of those types, and it's a grant because we pay for everything as far as strat possibly redoing part of a website. We really work at trying to give them everything they need with a 2-year, because people, I mean, you give them a year and it's really not enough. You need to engage them for a while.
Yeah.
And I'm rambling now, so have I pretty much covered what you wanted?
No, you're not rambling. I think you're getting in it. I mean, you give up to $4 million. The project gives up to $4 million a year away. Is that right?
Actually, we said 2, but the first year we ended up with 3.2, and that did not even contain all of the Lift programs. We actually gave more than 4 million last year, and we gave more than 4 million this year. And the StratOps, the RevGen, all of those types of grants haven't even been given. So we will see what we have. Right now we have 80 some grants with 52 individual unique programs. And they're not all, although if you look on the website, you would assume it says women. We do have projects with children, and we actually dipped our toe in a small way in the international market. I personally think that we ought to take care of ourselves in the United States. I don't think that people understand how prevalent. Yes, we know domestic violence, how prevalent that is, and then there's sexual assault and rape, and those two are so tied in with one another. And then I will tell you this, the next thing that I should say, I've experienced sexual assault, I've experienced child abuse, and now I did also experience domestic violence because I had a husband that shot me in the face, neck, and shoulders. It's all birdshot, but if you took an x-ray, you could see all of it in because they didn't want anything to get damaged, and I didn't either. So you take sexual assault, child abuse, rape, and domestic violence, and I will tell you all of those are in the human trafficking field, the sexual exploitation of individuals. And unfortunately, what we've found out is the major group of people that end up being in the world of human trafficking, or pimped out, if you want to call it, are those that have been abused as a kid. So it's amazing that those kids will take and be groomed and become a piece of meat to a gentleman. And then they also, once they're abused, many of those, and especially the males, and I'm sorry for being honest, that's very frustrating, that they will abuse again. And what people don't understand is it's growing. So if you had I'm sorry, we'll get into human trafficking. I picked human trafficking as the mainstay for the Jensen project because I wanted to take on something that I think, by the grace of God, it's not occurred to me. And I think it's so prevalent right now, and I know it's not just me. I know that it's so prevalent. And if you take 2 to 15 individuals that are trafficking individuals, they do have men and they also have women, but any of the men, a very large proportion goes down, and they will repeat exactly what's happened. And the women will also repeat it, but not like in human trafficking. So as we do this, we spread out, and then it just keeps going wider and
Right.
wider and wider.
Like a cancer, right? It's like a cancer of evil that just keeps growing wider and wider. You have to
Yeah.
burn it out of society. You had to turn a corner. You went from somebody who was told to be quiet and who was silenced and who was almost beaten into submission to standing up and saying, you know what, F that, I'm not going to be quiet. I'm not going to go gently. What was that thing for you? Because I think that story, I think so many women are stuck where they feel, or so many victims are stuck feeling like they're told to be quiet, so they stay quiet. They don't know how to bridge that. They don't know how to cross that threshold. What was that moment in your life where you just crushed the threshold? Where you're like, you know what? I'm doing something about it. I'm going to become an advocate. I'm going to start talking. I'm going to start telling my story. And how did you reclaim your narrative?
Well, the initial would have been a couple of weeks in. That's when I thought about it. It actually took more than a year to really believe in myself. I had to look at it as happiness is a form of courage. And so the courage that helped me really go out and start speaking, where that I run into more women that this has repeatedly happened to that don't speak. Why I went out and spoke is I went back to the office, and at that time, we had those big clunky computers, and it wasn't about put it in the computer, it was about putting it in the file. So I would be in the room and working, and it was a large room, and somebody would slam the file, and I would just scream and think that the world had come to an end. So working really wasn't an option for me, and I was so beat up that people couldn't really look at me. So I decided that I was going to take the time to sit down and figure out how I could get on the road. And I did it. If I was honest, I did it out of desperation. The, I mean, if you think about it, I had great parents, honestly, although the whole thing with me being a young child and that might have been the best play at that point in time, because whatever people would have said and done when I was younger could have been interesting at best. So I really sat around and I thought to myself, I had good parents, I had my siblings, and I had one or two friends that believed in me, and I tried to only circulate in that group and think about what I could do that would help just one individual. And if I helped one individual with anything that I did, I told myself that was success. And I needed to feel some success. I had been brought up to act enthusiastic and you'll be enthusiastic. And I got desperate and decided to go speak. And in my first speaking engagement, I had 8 women come up out of a group of 50. So therein lies where I just decided I have to do something.
Yeah.
I actually, Chris, I took a break on this for a while. I got an opportunity to help take a company public, and that's why I'm sitting here today, because I sold my shares and got out and put it into the foundation. I was extraordinarily lucky, and sometimes lucky if you're prepared, and I was prepared, and I just decided I had to go about it. And I don't know what it was. I can tell you all the things that were in my head. I have a notebook that I sketched in, and I sketched boots because I was always told, number one, if my mother put a boot on the table to eat, we had to eat it and take your boots by the bootstraps and pick them up and move on. So some of it probably it was embedded in me as a child from my parents. The other part was, I had to say something. And that's probably why I went so crazy when I got raped. I started screaming about it because it wasn't, life isn't fair, but it just wasn't fair. So I just decided I had to do something.
Yeah.
The police officer or the detective Detective Smith, you wouldn't believe that, but it was really Detective Smith, urged me to go on too. And I went down and got certified so I could be an advocate, and went into the hospital. We used to wear beepers. If you got the beep, you would go down. And I had experiences with these people that there was no way that I could not speak, because I remained in contact with probably 3/4 of them for the better part of 10 years. I still know a couple of them, and I don't know of anybody that told their story.
Right.
So 1 out of 6 women either are attempted rape or are raped in their lifetime. That is a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
there was a figure, someone said 1 out of 4, there was a stat, 1 out of 4 is molested or attempted rape. And so 1 out of 4, 1 out of 6, it's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, I know like when my wife is, I know that for a fact when she runs an errand by herself, honestly, I think about it all the time where I'm like, be careful in the parking lot, be careful. I just think about it. Like I think about her safety. That's the only woman that we have in my family other than my mom and my cousins and stuff. But I mean, the one that I'm partnered up with, and because I don't have daughters, we have sons. But even with my sons, when we were in the mall, if there was somebody looking at them too intensely, all of my hackles went up, and I'd be like, what are you looking at? Like, I mean, I would get, because it's like, you worry, you hear stories, and you hear stories about, as a parent, you hear so many stories about sexual trafficking, and it's scary. Like, it's scary. So I can't imagine, I don't know, I can't imagine what you went through. And all I know is the product of what you went through led to who you are and what you're doing. And I know that the changes that you're making in this world are extraordinary, and they're so positive, and you're shining so much light. I wanted to bring on, there's a gentleman, we were going to talk to Don from the National Center on Exploitation. And I know that the Jensen Project has given some money to them. Is that correct? You've helped that group a little bit?
we are also in advocacy and policy. And
Okay.
I never thought I would be in policy. So.
And policy is changing law. And
Yeah.
policy is literally suing people, creating new laws, getting bills passed into law, like changing the way that the laws work. This is an international show, so people in the UK are watching right now. And I've seen a couple notes where people are saying, holy cow, that happens in the US. Like our laws are better in the UK than they are in the US. And we've got work to do as a country. We have a lot of work to do to protect our women and to protect our children. I'm going to see if I'm going to leave you on, Janet. Let me see if I can bring, his name is Jake. And let me see if I can bring Jake on. There we go. He's coming on. So straight. Yeah, there he is. Hey, Jake.
Hey there, Kristoffer. Hi, Janet.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course, of course. Janet was bold enough to and just courageous enough to tell her story. And I know that you work with the National Center of Sexual Exploitation. And I just wanted to, because there's so many people who don't feel like they have a voice, where something traumatic happens to them, and they feel isolated and they feel shut down on a spiritual level, if you want to talk about it, from like that sin occurs and they just get like attacked, and they get further and further back from relationship, really cuts relationship off. But Janet and the Jensen Project and you guys over at, do you call it, is it Nicosi?
Nicosi. Yeah.
Nicosi.
Yeah.
You guys are doing something about it. And do you mind just taking a minute and kind of talking about some of the things that you guys are doing to give advocacy and to give a voice to victims and to people who've been abused or sexually, who are being trafficked, who are being prostituted, all of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we always like to start with talking about our why as an organization. And our why at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation is that we exist to build a world where all people can live and love without sexual abuse and exploitation. And then we step down from there into the what. How is it that we go about doing that? And for us, it's looking at the entire web of sexual abuse and exploitation and how they're each different form of abuse and exploitation is interconnected. And then we mobilize legal, corporate, and legislative advocacy, all the way down from working directly with politicians, working directly with corporations like Google, Netflix, TikTok, and more, to grassroots efforts, where when certain companies are not listening to what we're saying, we come to them with survivors. We come together, we work together with survivors and lived experience experts to go and to advocate. And when that doesn't work, and we go and we work directly with our friends across the country and around the world to do these grassroots advocacy campaigns and see change happen that way. And for us, as you said, talking about working alongside survivors and lived experience experts, they're the key. They have to inform everything we do. They guide our policy, our advocacy, our education and training efforts. And so we're committed to that as a part of everything that we do in any of those fronts, whether it's corporate advocacy, public policy, or in the courtroom. It's all on behalf of survivors, on those who have been marginalized. I think you were talking about earlier, those who have been told to be silent in so many ways, in so many places, for far too long.
Yeah. One of the things you guys do is you have a naughty list. Is that right? There are corporations who are engaged in something, and it might be a tech company that allows basically pornography to be like side by side with their platform or whatever that is. And you guys have approached them and you said, hey, this is what's happening. This is the effect of that's happening. This is what's being allowed to happen on your platform. You should take it down. And if they don't, they get on there's a naughty list, right?
Yeah, it's called the Dirty Dozen. The Dirty Dozen list every year. And yeah, it's 12 entities. It's been everything from states, like we've gone after the entire state of Nevada. We actually currently have a lawsuit against them with Google, like I said, Netflix, Meta, formerly known as Facebook, Visa, OnlyFans, Discord. You kind of, the who's who. We have, like you said, when we go to them directly, we say, here's what people have experienced, here's what people are living through right now, and you need to fix these things. And when that doesn't work, the Dirty Dozen list, helps make change. And there have been dozens of changes. Just last year, Google agreed to update all of the Chromebooks that they distribute to schools. While kids were doing school from home, and they were getting these Chromebooks, tens of millions of kids getting Chromebooks. They were completely unlocked, basically no safety features in place. And because of the Dirty Dozen list and advocates and, reaching out to Google directly through the actions we put out, all of those Chromebooks that are being distributed to kids now have all the safety features enabled from the get-go. Parents don't have to, parents always should be involved, but right away, out of the box, those safety features are in place. Kids are safer today thanks to a tech company listening and making a change.
Yeah. I'll never forget, my kid loved sharks, like little sharks, and he looked up something. I won't name the name of it because that'll, that's just going to perpetuate it. But he looked something up and it ended up being like a cartoon porn site. And I'll never forget the look on his face. Julianne was in the room, like folding some clothes for him. And I was in the doorway talking to her. And all of a sudden he just looked up at me and I looked at him and I said, "Are you okay, buddy?" And I went and we started talking and I said, "What happened? Like, are you okay?" And he was like, all I was doing was looking up sharks. And he showed me the site that it went to. And it was the weirdest, guys. It was the weirdest stuff.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, Janet.
So, or not a question. The average, I don't know what they say, but the average age for children, for boys anyway, is between 8 and 11 that they see their first pornography. And unfortunately, women are too. And I think that is one of the things that Nicosia is going after, because they are groomed at a very young age from there. And hence, I have to say one thing though, Jake, you need to tell people that Etsy actually made the Dirty Dozen, and that blew me away. So they hide all of this in so many ways that the Chromebook is great. There's just other ways they get in and see it, and then they get interested. And unfortunately, there is a problem. They've actually had studies on young men because they have erectile dysfunction at 6 or 7 because they were watching, or 6 or 7, 16 or 17 was the group that they were studying because they had watched porn all their life. And that had changed, obviously, physically, but think about them mentally.
Yeah, the mental. I have a question for you guys. You're both, I mean, this show is not it's not a religious show at all, but I am a Christian and I talk about my faith and I talk about the narrative. And so when I talk about sin, that's the viewpoint that I look at it through. There is something wrong with our society right now. And when you are trading women, like Janet, you used the word meat earlier, when you're, those massage parlors, like we live in an area where you just, all these like little massage parlors are popping up and none of it is healthy. Pornography, none of it is healthy. It's just, so are there things that are approaching our young men and how we're raising our men so that men start to have advocacy as well and can join up instead of feeling like they're the ones who are the predators, which unfortunately they are? And so how do we talk to that younger generation so that as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, like they just start to say like porn, why is porn, like everyone, like Playboy, everyone's like, hey, Playboy, but that really began, that normalized pornography for our country. And it starts to, you see this really slippery slope where, and I grew up in Nevada, Jake, so I'm glad you're suing that state because prostitution cannot be legal. When you see the ensnarement that it has on these women, they get stuck and then they age out and there's nowhere, I mean, there's nothing good that comes from that profession. And I know there's a whole legal issue with my body, my choice, but anyway, I'll let you guys discuss that. Anything for the men?
I would suggest, Chris, that we sit down and write out what a parent that watches this should look for, should watch, because you can watch a child change. And if you realize, I shouldn't say, I personally didn't have children for a reason that's pretty sad, but there is a point in time that, unfortunately, as you said, the society, the parents aren't involved, and so they don't talk about it. And then you have friends that are showing the kids. So I think you have to get the education of parents and to educate their children. And Jake may have something to say on this. I also believe that parents ought to realize that people now will, men mostly, will call, and if they're looking for someone, they call up and say, I want the youngest one and a screamer. Or if they're watching on the dark web, the pornography out there, I mean, they rape and murder people on there. So you've got, and there's ways for kids to get in, and especially during the pandemic, I won't name names, but they opened it up. They had Prime, or a premium program where they let anybody have it. And porn is addiction. I mean, it does to the brain what drugs do. As cards, betting, or any
gambling.
Sorry, couldn't get the word out.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know. I'll quit rambling, Jake. It's on you now.
And I'll lead it off, Jake. Like Twitter or like Instagram, like it's just you're a click away, right? Like there's things that are running parallel to what we see normally, and then all of a sudden you take a sharp right and you're in this really dark territory. Yeah.
Right. It's so easy. Janet mentioned, Etsy even made it onto the list because any of us could be on Etsy looking for something, and recommended products have got pornographic material or rape themed like shirts and like products and all this kind of stuff, like where you're not even out here looking for it. It's being recommended to you by an algorithm. And so, yeah, you're like you said, you're all, especially online, you're a short, it's not even a click anymore. You're an algorithm serving something up away without you even having to click on something. But to your question about, how do we encourage men and young boys? And that weighs heavy on my heart because I'm a father of 4 children. I've got 4 kids between the ages of 6 and 12. 3 of them are boys. And I look out and I see a culture, whether you call it sin, whether you call it injustice, whatever you want, exploitation, abuse,
right,
in your worldview, the culture is permeated with it. We see systemic injustice, and especially in these issues of abuse and exploitation. And so much that when you get ensnared in it as a young man, there's so much shame, there's so much guilt. And something I've been trying to talk through with my boys is, what is your sexuality for?
Mm-hmm.
Not just what are we against, but why were you created with this drive?
Right.
Why were you created with these instincts? And that's something that's big for us at the National Center. Like you heard from the start, we want to build a world where people can live and love free from abuse and exploitation. It's not just the absence of abuse and exploitation. It is living into something, a freedom, a wholeness.
Right.
And so as we think about it, as we approach men, and especially young men and boys, as this culture, the systemic culture is infecting them at such young ages, I like to think of the conversation as, what is this for? And because you have these drives, you have these urges, and they are meant to be for something healthy. They're actually meant to drive you to honor and respect and dignify and uplift others and women and those around you, not to consume them for your own pleasure, not to live this hedonistic lifestyle, but to serve others, to lead through building others up. And that's what that drive is for. It's meant to push us to build up, not to tear down.
Right.
And I think if we can have more of those conversations with men and with young boys in particular, then hopefully we can inspire them with a vision for the future where they're not enslaved to the injustice of the culture. They're not enslaved to their own desires, but that they are able to transcend, and they're able to uplift, and they're able to be a part of a proactive building of a better world. And I think especially for those that are at younger ages, giving them something that they can aspire to is so much healthier than just beating them down and saying, don't be terrible. Even though, there are times where we have to have those conversations, but it's like, not don't be terrible, but how do you be better? How do you use this to build others up? And getting out of that shame mindset, which is really a part of the addiction criteria. There's 5 criteria of addiction, and the last one is shame. And when you spend long enough time in shame, you cycle back into fantasy because you're trying to get out of the gunk in your mind. And so what if we help people avoid shame in the first place?
Well, I didn't know that. What are the 5 steps? That might be interesting for people to hear. Do you know them all?
Yeah, so the 5 criteria of addiction are so there's fantasization, and that's where we're building things up in our mind, right? And we're thinking of whatever that is. Pornography is a part of fantasization, right? It's fantasizing our lust.
It's objectifying, right?
Or, yeah, objectification. So then we medicate. Medication is the second criteria. That's when we're actually indulging in something. And so that's when we watch pornography. That's when when people will buy sex, or they'll rape, whatever their thing in addiction is, they'll perpetrate, and that's the medication aspect. Then there is a false sense of control. When you get that high, a couple of things can happen. It can look different and nuanced for everybody, but in that false sense of control, either you think, oh, no, I got that out of my system. I can never do this again. I got this. I'm never going to touch this again because the urge is gone. And so you're like, I got this. I will stay away from this forever. Or you think, oh yeah, I got away with it. I'm okay. I got this. I can kind of keep this under control. I can keep everything under wraps. Then it becomes self-nurturing is the 4th criteria. Self-nurturing is where, as an example, like let's say you're in a marriage relationship, and you start to Jones, right? You start to come down off of your medication and you need another hit, but maybe you've got some things holding you back. You look for ways to self-nurture your addiction by maybe you pick a fight with your significant other, and then it blows up, and then you're like, now you've got an excuse like, oh, look at how awful they were treating me. I'm going to go over here and medicate again and engage in the other. And then in all of these things, there's micro and macro in midst all of these stages, but then there's the shame of I did it again. I'm beating myself up. I'm tearing myself down. I'm awful. I screwed it up. I'm the worst, but you're not actually dealing with it. You're just beating yourself down. And once in your brain, there's chemical reactions happening in all this. Your brain can only stay in that state for so long until you start to need a relief. And so then you start to fantasize again, you start to rationalize again, and then you're back into the medication. You're cycling through the criteria.
Wow. I've never heard it put like that, but that's a really keen insight in the mentality of addiction. And the problem with our society is that when you go into a hotel room, you've got movies, you've got porn right there with your family films, and there's always this temptation, or you're on Twitter or you're on the computer. And if you're somebody who's dealing with that struggle, then you're always going to be tempted. There's always going to be something.
Right. It's always going to be easy to get better. And I want to make sure I get.
Which is what I love. You guys are actually suing companies to change, right? That's where the advocate. That's where we're talking about literally changing laws, right? And that's what Janet was,
right.
Which is why it was a great segue to bring you on. And there are big things happening, correct? You have lawyers and there are people being sued currently.
Huge, yeah. It's a key thing. That's where our public policy and our litigation kind of come hand in hand. Like a great example of that is with, you mentioned Twitter earlier. We've got a lawsuit against Twitter where a young boy was found and groomed actually on Snapchat. And the full story is on our website and sexualexploitation.org. But he was found and groomed by a predator on Snapchat who posed as a teen and generated, built up a relationship, asked for this child to create some child sexual abuse material, which is often called child pornography, but it's child sexual abuse material. He created it thinking he was sending it to another teenager. Turns out it was an adult predator who then blackmailed him into making more, ended up putting the resulting content onto Twitter, where it started getting tens of thousands of views. Told his parents, they contacted Twitter, proved his identity, proved his age, and Twitter looked at it and said, this doesn't violate our policies. And it stayed up for a while later, approximately a week after that point, gained over 100,000 views on Twitter before this a friend of a friend worked, with the US government, got, asked them to send an email to Twitter. Twitter finally took it down. But Twitter and other companies like Twitter, when this stuff happens, they say, no. Communications Decency Act, Section 230 gives us immunity from liability for this. We're protected because we're just other people we're a third party. Other people are putting the content on our website. And in the courts, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act has been misinterpreted time and time again to grant that immunity from liability to tech platforms, even though that was never the original intent of Section 230, which was passed by Congress in the 90s. So enter our lawsuit, which is coming in to say, no, Twitter must be held liable. They facilitated criminal activity knowingly. They were provided all the evidence to show this is a child, this is who the child is, this material must come down, and they did not do it. And we're very grateful that in this case, John Doe v. Twitter, the judge correctly ruled that the case was allowed to proceed. And so that case is moving forward in federal court against Twitter. But where it connects into the Earn It Act, the Earn It Act is some legislation pending before the Senate right now that we've been pushing through for the last 3 years that helps clarify that intent of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, that clarifies that it was never meant to protect companies that facilitated sex trafficking or child sexual abuse, and thereby restoring the right of private citizens, consumers like you and I, to try to hold these companies accountable in the court of law. Because we've seen our Twitter lawsuit got through, but we've seen far too many cases, dozens of cases, where the lawsuits have been tossed against Omegle, against Kik and other social media platforms, where the law has been misinterpreted. And so that's why for us, it's it's corporate advocacy, public policy, and litigation. Litigation, when all else fails, public policy, so we can change the laws in the first place and empower the everyday person in the first place. And then the corporate advocacy be it for that, so that we never have to get there in the first place, that these people are doing, these companies are doing the right thing. And so that's just one example of that intersection and how these issues are connected, and how we're trying to use, the rule of law, democracy, and advocacy and consumer rights to get these companies to do the right thing and to make the world a safer place.
Yeah, because it does. It seems like the policy protects the predator right now and not the victims.
Yeah.
Which is why Janet was told to be quiet. It's because of the people in charge don't rock the boat. And I think that's where people are feeling, like they don't have a place to have a voice. But if all of a sudden the policy, moved towards the other side of that pendulum and said, no, we're going to hear people out, and we have to. If there's smoke, there's fire. Let's talk about this. You guys are awesome for joining the show today. I like to respect everybody's time, and we're coming in on 5 o'clock Western time. I know, Jake, you've got some sick little kids at home too, so I really appreciate you jumping on and sharing your information. I would love to have you guys both on again at some point. Janet, I know that you're going to come on, and more people from the Jensen Project will come on. We're really going to keep talking about the project and what we're doing, the work we're doing. And I know there's still, I know we just scratched the iceberg for what you guys are doing in Nicosia. So I'd love to have you guys on again. Thank you for your time today.
You're welcome. Yeah, so glad.
Any last little words, Janet or Jake? You guys have anything you want to add before we bail?
Change is inevitable. Growth is optional.
Okay.
And there's hope. Google's changing. TikTok's changing. These companies, Etsy, all of these companies are making changes because of people who are viewing this video, who are willing to believe that there is hope. So keep holding on to that hope, because change is possible.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right, you guys, I'm super grateful for both of you joining. Jake, I'm going to take you off, so have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
And Janet, I will see you in September, but we're going to be talking between now and then. And I hope that you enjoyed your time on the show today. I hope that you come back and we can keep talking.
Anytime.
Good. Now that we got this figured out, it's easy once you try, right?
Yes, my first Instagram. I will probably write this down as a very monumental moment.
Good. Well, I know that people have enjoyed it. I've just been watching the comments and they just loved what you had to say. And I know that you have so much more to say. And so an hour just it's never enough time. And I did want to get Jake on the show and have that as well. Just know that people are, and what I do want, let's get Emily to send me a list of all of the people that the Jensen Project is funding at this point, and we could list them on this video so people could just start seeing locally, because it's across, it's in every, we're tapping into all 50 states.
We don't have all 50 yet, but we have 23 out of 50.
Yeah. And there are people like, look, there's a note right here. This woman is desperately trying to get help. There's just people who are out there hurting, and who need help, and knowing that there's places that they could just pick up the phone and call in their neighborhood, knowing that there are people who are willing to hear their story, knowing there are people who are willing to be advocates and allies to them and for them. That's a big deal. That's the first huge step. And then to parrot Jake, there is hope. There's a hope. There's hope for a new tomorrow.
This is true.
All right. Great to see you. Thank you for coming on. It's called the Jensen Project. You can follow it here on Instagram. You have a website. Just type in the Jensen Project, JENSEN Project. And then Nicosia, if you want to do that, you go on the website, and it's called the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, NCOSE.com. And there's so many groups out there that are doing incredible stuff. And so we'll keep doing this. We'll do this again.
Perfect. Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you, Jen. Of course. Thank you so much. I'm going to say bye.
Goodbye.
Bye. And then, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. I think, guys, I got hit this week. Someone in our community is not doing great. And I'm always in an interesting position being who I am in this world, and communicating through Instagram, which is not personal. It's inauthentic in the sense that there's a big giant barrier. And so while we all feel like we know each other until we meet in person, until we have that real relationship, it's just hard for me to communicate. So when members of our community are hurting, the only thing I know to do, and the only thing I can do, is lift them up in prayer. And so if you're out there right now and you're watching this and your heart is just broken, if you're dealing with stuff that is insurmountable and you feel hopeless, you aren't alone. And even though there aren't people via this community that can go to your house, knock on your door, bring you soup, there are people who are praying for you. And so I just got an email before the show started that someone's grandmother's dying, and so for all the people out there who are hurting, I'm just going to lift up this prayer. Father God, I just ask that you are with the people in this community, that you heal the brokenhearted, that it is in the broken hearts that you've made room for them to grow and for them to find hope. And so I pray that you just shine a light into all the dark places. And for the women and for the men who have been abused sexually, I pray for healing. I pray that you allow them to reclaim their narrative. I pray that you allow them to find power, become warriors, or become just these soldiers of light. And so that we can start to have a real change in this world, and to have new expectations, and to have new hope. And I'm asking all of this in your holy name. Guys, amen. Have a great week, everybody. Thank you for watching these 3-part series of, this is the third and final part of this month. We're going to move into May, and next week is Mother's Day and my wife's birthday. So I'm not going to have a Polaha Chautauqua for her birthday and for Mother's Day, but I want to wish all you mothers out there and all you grandmothers out there a happy Mother's Day. Julianne, happy birthday, baby, next week, next Sunday. I will see you the Sunday after that. And it's going to be, guys, you're going to join me in France here in a minute. We're going to go to France. I've got 2 guests lined up that are just going to be so much fun. Super carefree as we move into graduation, and then we're going dark for the summer. So we're going to end this on a positive note, back to our format of just hanging out, doing our thing, and being a community. Guys, love you all. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.